Thomas found himself completely alone in his residence throughout an entire week last December. His partner had traveled to visit her family for the festive season, while he remained behind due to employment obligations. His home was situated in a tranquil neighborhood within a modest community in upstate New York, where residences were considerably spaced apart and most residents departed during the Christmas period. The prospect of solitude initially appealed to him, as he anticipated relaxation and the opportunity to enjoy seasonal programming in peaceful comfort. Before we continue, make sure you're subscribed with notifications on, and tell me in the comments what city you're watching from. Alright, let's dive back in. However, what transpired during those 7 days would permanently alter his sense of security. On the second evening of his isolation, at approximately 6:30 in the evening when darkness had completely enveloped the landscape, something extraordinary occurred. A light snowfall had continued throughout the day, leaving a pristine white coating across his lawn and driveway. While preparing a modest meal of pasta and chicken in his kitchen, cooking never being his particular strength, as his partner typically handled culinary responsibilities, he activated the television to combat the oppressive silence that had begun to unsettle him. As Thomas consumed his dinner at the table, an peculiar sound penetrated the ambient noise. It required several moments for him to identify the source. Someone was singing outside his home. After muting the television to concentrate, he confirmed the vocalization originated from beyond his walls. The melody crystallized into something recognizable, the traditional holiday song Jingle Bells. His initial assumption suggested neighborhood children engaged in winter play, yet the timbre possessed a distinctly adult male quality that contradicted this theory. Moving toward his front entrance, Thomas traced the sound to its apparent origin. With each step forward, the volume intensified dramatically. Upon reaching the door, the singing resonated as though emanating from immediately outside, practically upon his doorstep. An uncomfortable sensation manifested in his stomach, though he rationalized that perhaps a caroler had arrived at his residence. But what he discovered upon opening the door would prove far more disturbing than any traditional holiday greeting. When Thomas pulled open his front door, the porch light illuminated a man appearing to be approximately 35 years of age. The stranger wore no head covering despite the frigid temperatures, and his coat appeared inadequately thin for the weather conditions. Most peculiarly, the individual remained completely absorbed in his musical performance, his gaze fixed downward upon the welcome mat as though entirely unaware that the door had been opened to reveal an audience. Thomas manufactured a tentative smile, uncertain how to appropriately respond to this unprecedented situation. He had never encountered Christmas carolers at his residence previously, and certainly never witnessed a solitary adult male performing such traditions independently. It contradicted his understanding of caroling as inherently a group activity. The stranger's appearance suggested no immediate danger. Rather, he projected an aura of confusion or perhaps cognitive impairment. Thomas even briefly contemplated whether the individual might possess special needs, given his complete lack of reaction to Thomas's presence. The singing simply continued unabated. Upon completing one rendition of the seasonal melody, Thomas anticipated either verbal communication or departure. Instead, the stranger merely drew breath and recommenced the identical song from its beginning, maintaining the same gradually off-key vocalization. However, a critical change had occurred. The man now directed his gaze upward, establishing direct and unwavering eye contact with Thomas. The forced smile evaporated from Thomas's face as profound discomfort settled over the interaction. The singing continued, but something was shifting in the stranger's demeanor that made Thomas's blood run cold. Thomas maintained his position for another full minute, affecting the appearance of polite listening despite mounting discomfort. He persistently expected the performance to conclude after the second iteration, yet it did not. The stranger simply looped the song endlessly. Consulting his phone, Thomas realized nearly 4 minutes had elapsed while this individual repeated Jingle Bells in a continuous cycle outside his door. Finally determining he had endured sufficient awkwardness, Thomas expressed gratitude in courteous tones and gradually closed his door, presuming this dismissal would encourage the stranger's departure. However, once the door sealed shut, the singing persisted without diminishment. Thomas returned to his dining table and attempted to resume his meal while disregarding the continuing vocalization, but the extended duration rendered this impossible. The man's behavior deviated significantly from normal social parameters, and Thomas found it profoundly disturbing that this individual remained stationed directly outside his entrance, mechanically repeating the same melody. He briefly considered whether perhaps the stranger possessed special needs and might have a caretaker position nearby, possibly by the street, though he had observed no additional persons during his initial inspection. The situation created an oppressive atmosphere throughout his entire home, as though an unstable presence had violated his personal boundaries. Thomas persisted in consuming his dinner, though concentration eluded him entirely. The singing continued throughout his entire meal. Finally, after approximately 10 continuous minutes, the vocalization ceased. The abrupt silence actually caused Thomas to startle, as he had acclimated to the persistent background noise. What he saw when he checked the window made him realize the singing had actually been preferable to what was happening now. Rising slowly from his seat, Thomas approached the front door window cautiously. When he surveyed the exterior, he anticipated finding the area vacant, yet the stranger remained present. Critically, he had relocated, now positioned at the terminus of Thomas's driveway, facing the residence in complete stillness. No audible singing reached Thomas's ears from this distance. The man simply stood motionless in the accumulated snow, his stare fixed upon the door. This static observation somehow felt considerably more threatening than the repetitive singing. The stranger's posture suggested patient waiting. Thomas opened his door slightly and firmly stated that the individual could not remain on the property, that this constituted private land and he must depart immediately. The stranger exhibited no response whatsoever. The entire scenario possessed a profoundly unnatural quality that heightened Thomas's anxiety exponentially. Thomas finally issued an explicit warning that police would be contacted if the stranger failed to leave the premises, then secured his door once more. He maintained observation from the window for another minute, but the figure remained absolutely motionless. Thomas hesitated to actually summon law enforcement because he suspected possible mental health complications, and he wished to avoid exacerbating an already delicate situation. Instead, Thomas decided to retreat upstairs, secure his bedroom door, and attempt to decompress from the stressful encounter. Before changing into sleeping clothes, he verified the view from his upper floor window. Relief flooded through him as he observed that the stranger had vanished from the driveway. Apparently his threat had achieved the desired effect. But Thomas's relief would be devastatingly short-lived. After settling into bed with a lamp illuminated and opening a book to facilitate relaxation, approximately 20 minutes elapsed peacefully. Then a sound emanated from behind his residence. Thomas recognized it instantaneously with sickening certainty. The identical man had resumed singing Jingle Bells, except now the sound originated from his backyard. Thomas launched himself from his bed and rushed to the rear window. When he looked downward, he discovered not only that the stranger had trespassed directly into his backyard, but that the individual was already gazing upward at his bedroom window. The man stood in the snow directly beneath Thomas's window, directing his stare straight upward while continuing his mechanical song performance. Sliding open his window, Thomas shouted that he was summoning the police immediately. The singing terminated instantaneously. The stranger stood in total silence for approximately 3 seconds of charged tension. Then everything exploded into nightmare. The man suddenly erupted into a full sprint directly toward the back entrance on the lower level. The instant he disappeared from Thomas's visual range, the most horrifying sound Thomas had ever experienced in his entire existence pierced the night. The stranger commenced screaming at maximum volume, not conventional screaming, but rather something resembling death metal vocalization amplified to deranged, inhuman levels. The sound reverberated across the yard and penetrated throughout the entire structure. Then came the violent impacts. The back door shuddered under ferocious assault as the intruder kicked it, slammed his body against it, and apparently attempted to physically tear the doorknob from its mounting. Thomas could feel the vibrations from these impacts radiating through the floor of his upstairs bedroom. The terrifying realization crystallized. This individual wasn't merely peculiar or confused. He was actively attempting to force entry into the home. Thomas seized his phone and immediately dialed emergency services, desperately pleading for rapid response while explaining that a man was attempting to break inside. He maintained the connection while gripping a baseball bat in his other hand for potential defense. Backing into his bedroom closet, he secured himself inside the confined space as the operator instructed him to remain concealed. The screams and impacts from the lower level continued, and each passing second felt like the barrier would finally surrender to the assault. Then, just as suddenly as the chaos began, it stopped, and somehow the silence felt even more threatening. Everything went completely silent except for Thomas's labored breathing. He couldn't determine whether the intruder had departed or had somehow successfully gained entry to the residence. Thomas remained absolutely motionless inside the closet until police units arrived. Officers thoroughly inspected the entire exterior of the structure and confirmed the back door remained secured and locked. The operator conveyed that Thomas could safely emerge and meet with law enforcement. When Thomas finally stepped outside to greet the responding officers, he experienced his first genuine breath of relief. Walking around the backyard together, they discovered deep footprint impressions in the snow that documented precisely where the stranger had stood while singing up at the bedroom window, and where he had charged toward the back entrance. The trail of prints then extended off into the wooded area behind Thomas's property. The officers followed the trail briefly before returning, stating it wasn't worth pursuing deep into the woods during nighttime hours. Their casual attitude suggested they didn't consider the incident particularly serious. They informed Thomas that people exhibit strange behavior constantly, and as long as he maintained locked doors he should be fine. Their apparent disinterest in locating the intruder bothered Thomas considerably, though he felt too shaken to argue the point. After their departure, the residence felt horribly empty and cold. Thomas secured every door and window, then compulsively double-checked them repeatedly. At that point he had completely abandoned any appreciation for solitude and desperately wished for his partner's return home. He spent Christmas Eve and Christmas Day at his parents' residence, thankfully. As for the singing stranger, he never returned, at least not to Thomas's knowledge. This narrative concerns a Christmas experience from approximately 10 years ago. The storyteller, whom we'll call Marcus, was 6 years old at the time, having just celebrated his November birthday. The family was now preparing for the approaching holiday season. Marcus's birthday celebration coincided with the famous athletic catch by a professional football player that became widely discussed sports news. Marcus lived with family members who supported one team, while he favored their rival franchise. He recalls the spectacular catch dominating conversation throughout the evening and even during his birthday festivities. It proved an eventful birthday week, and Marcus finds it surprising he retained such detailed memories from age 6. Though he didn't fully comprehend football, he understood the catch was extraordinary, so he simply lived in the moment and enjoyed his special day like any other child. For his birthday, Marcus received tickets to a professional basketball game on December 30th, but before he could reach that game, something would happen that would haunt him for years. Marcus supported a different basketball team than the local franchise, but since they resided in the metropolitan area, he knew many local fans and considered himself a modest supporter as well, so he felt grateful for the opportunity. This would mark his first professional basketball game experience. Christmas Day arrived 5 days prior, and among his gifts Marcus received a new football jersey and basketball team apparel as he was developing into a sports enthusiast. He experienced a wonderful Christmas, but one gift included another basketball game on December 27th featuring a matchup against a team from Oklahoma. Marcus felt tremendous excitement about attending both games. When the day arrived, they traveled to the arena, and the home team won a competitive contest with a final score around 112 to 105. Witnessing such an event in a professional arena for the first time proved extraordinary for young Marcus. They departed the game and drove home, which required perhaps 45 minutes from the downtown arena. The subsequent days passed normally, but Marcus maintained his excitement about returning to that amazing stadium atmosphere. When they attended the second game, Marcus didn't know it would be the last time he visited for years. At the previous game they had enjoyed premium seats approximately 7 rows from the court in the center section, but this time they were seated perhaps 20 rows back in a corner area, so the experience differed significantly. The game progressed well and Marcus enjoyed himself. The home team was dominating by approximately 20 to 30 points at halftime. As Marcus and his family left their seats during halftime, they had no idea they were being watched. Being a child, Marcus wanted to explore and obtain food and visit the restroom independently, but he was with his parents and only 6 years old. So Marcus and his family walked to get some food. They waited in line for perhaps 20 minutes. His father went to another food vendor inside the arena to get different items, and Marcus stayed with his brother who was waiting in line to pay. As they spoke with the worker, Marcus walked away to discard some candy they had purchased before the game. He walked to a trash receptacle maybe 30 feet away. As he reached it, a tall Caucasian man approached him and inquired, "Hey, are you lost?" Marcus shook his head and didn't speak. The man said he didn't see Marcus's parents around and told him, "Let's go look." As he grasped Marcus's hand and walked with him, Marcus, being just a child, complied and walked alongside him. The stranger led Marcus toward the upper seating levels and explained they were going to the intercom system so they could announce Marcus's name and locate his parents. Marcus agreed and continued walking. They reached the top level and waited for about 10 minutes. The man waited until no other people were nearby. Then he tried pushing Marcus toward the emergency stairs, and Marcus suddenly realized he was in terrible danger. Marcus doesn't remember exactly whether it was stairs or an elevator, but he distinctly recalls that no one else was around in that area. Then he remembered stranger danger warnings, and guilt and fear started overwhelming him. He realized he shouldn't accompany this man who possessed no credentials or authority whatsoever. When the stranger released Marcus's hand to check his phone, Marcus ran all the way back to the stands. As he ran, he saw the man standing there with a small grin on his face, an image that would haunt Marcus for years. Marcus couldn't immediately find his parents, but he didn't care at that moment. He just wanted to be somewhere he perceived as safe. Marcus found his brother, who hadn't informed their parents he'd lost Marcus because he didn't want to get in trouble. His brother asked if Marcus was okay, and Marcus said yes, choosing not to say anything about what had just happened. The game ended with a home team victory, but Marcus didn't care anymore. He just wanted to go home. As they exited, Marcus was quiet. When they got in their car, Marcus remained quiet. His parents seemed confused that he didn't appear energetic, but Marcus told them he was tired. As they drove home, Marcus almost fell asleep, but then a loud honk and screech from behind them shattered the silence. The noise was so loud Marcus almost screamed. He turned around and there he was, the same man driving a truck with maybe 3 other men inside. Marcus couldn't identify who they were, just silhouettes. Marcus's parents yelled at them from their car when they pulled up beside them, but the men just stared. Marcus wanted to say something so desperately, but for some reason he didn't. When they arrived home, Marcus went right to sleep and passed out fast. In the middle of the night, Marcus woke with chills. He noticed a light flashing at his window. He looked out, expecting something innocent, perhaps holiday decorations or car headlights, but instead saw that man standing outside shining a flashlight directly into his bedroom window. Marcus screamed and ran to his parents' room, telling them someone was at his window. They rushed outside and searched for maybe 20 minutes. They didn't find anything, and since Marcus was a child, they didn't believe him. They suggested it must have been a shadow from a car, but Marcus knew what he saw. On New Year's Eve, a couple days later, the doorbell rang, and Marcus heard a voice that made his blood turn to ice. They were about 5 or 6 minutes away from midnight, watching the ball drop celebration. Marcus's parents answered the door. Marcus didn't pay attention until he heard the man's voice, and he was 100% certain it was him, the same man from the arena. Marcus told his parents, but they didn't believe him. He explained that at the game the man had brought him to the high level, and Marcus had run away and escaped, but they still didn't believe him. They said it was just a man distributing lost dog flyers for his cousin's pet. The night continued and Marcus was fine initially. But then a year later on New Year's Eve, there was a knock at Marcus's bedroom window. Keep in mind, Marcus had forgotten about the situation by this point. He got up and looked, and there was a piece of paper taped to the window that read, "This New Year, you'll meet me again." Marcus gave his parents the note and they filed a police report, but they never heard anything back. Every couple of years, Marcus gets terrified of New Year's Eve, thinking that man will return. Marcus told his parents he never wanted to return to a professional basketball game, claiming it wasn't his interest. But now at age 16, it scares Marcus that the man knows where he lives. He's considering attending a game on January 2nd or 3rd, which would be his first game since then, but he remains uncertain. This experience scared him away from basketball and made him always close his curtains. Marcus remembers this night with excessive clarity. Even now, he thinks about how close his family came to something truly terrible. It was early December and they decided to drive north into the mountains to cut down a real Christmas tree. This was something Marcus and his wife Laura always wanted to experience, and their 7-year-old son Daniel was excited about it too. The weather was cold and cloudy, and the sky possessed that heavy appearance where it feels like snow is perpetually about to fall again. To them, this enhanced the Christmas atmosphere. The entire journey up the winding roads made Marcus feel like a child again. It had been considerable time since he'd done something this unique and festive, and having Daniel so excited about it transported Marcus back to his youth. When they finally reached the remote area Laura found online, there were no other cars around, a detail that should have warned them something wasn't right. There were numerous light posts scattered around the parking area, so they weren't in complete darkness if you were wondering. That's why they selected the location. Still, they brought flashlights as a precaution. They parked by a small unmarked path that led deeper into the trees. Substantial snow covered the ground from snowfall they'd received a few days earlier, and at this elevation the snow took even longer to melt. Daniel jumped out of the car immediately and started throwing snowballs at them, so Marcus started throwing them back. They were there to have fun, so of course Marcus wanted to make it as memorable as possible for Daniel. Marcus grabbed their flashlights and the axe he planned to use to chop down a tree. They walked up the narrow path with snow crunching under their boots. Daniel kept running ahead, stopping to point at trees he thought might be perfect. The deeper they went, the more the road behind them disappeared, and the only light came from the faint moon glowing behind thick clouds. It was so quiet that Marcus asked Laura and Daniel to stop for a second just to really absorb it. There was not a single sound, maybe a light breeze at most. To be honest, if Marcus had been there alone, he'd have been slightly disturbed just from the silence and darkness alone. As they walked deeper onto the trail, they had to utilize all 3 flashlights. Daniel was having considerable fun with his flashlight until the light from the parking lot was no longer visible and it was now essentially total darkness outside the flashlight beams. Daniel started to get noticeably nervous because he asked how far they were going to go and made a comment about the darkness. Marcus kept feeling like someone was watching them or like something was walking behind them. But every time he turned around, there was nothing but the empty snow path. About 10 minutes in, they found a spot where the trees were tall and full, but they weren't alone. Daniel ran around the trees in circles, looking for the best one. Laura stayed closer to Marcus and whispered that she wanted to pick a tree fast because she had a weird feeling too. Marcus understood exactly what she meant. This was considerably creepier than he had imagined. Right then, Marcus heard soft crunching behind them. It wasn't any of them, nor was it an animal. It sounded like boots crunching the snow, but very slowly and deliberately, almost sneaking-like. When Marcus turned around, he saw a man in dark clothes standing about 20 feet back on the path. He wasn't dressed appropriately for the weather. His hands were bare and red from the cold. His jacket looked more like a windbreaker. His face looked pale and stiff, like he'd been exposed to the cold for far too long. Laura grabbed Daniel's arm to pull him closer. When the man noticed they were looking at him, he suddenly smiled in a deeply unsettling way and stepped closer. He asked if they were looking for a Christmas tree. His voice, breaking the already unsettling silence, was profoundly uncomfortable. His voice was deep and kind of soft. Before Marcus could respond, Daniel answered yes, excited again, and Marcus felt a jolt of panic because he didn't want this man knowing anything about them. Laura quickly told him no, that they were just walking. The man stepped closer again, and the way he moved made every hair on Marcus's arm stand up. He told them not to worry because he wasn't a park ranger, and the way he said it made them realize he knew exactly what they were doing illegally. Marcus didn't want to converse with him at all. Something was profoundly wrong with him. He looked hungry or desperate or like he hadn't slept in days. Marcus guessed, for lack of a better description, he looked homeless. Marcus told Laura they should head back to the car and she nodded, gripping Daniel's jacket. When they started walking past the man, he stood by smiling and watching, giving slight nods as if to say goodbye as they walked. Daniel kept turning around asking if the man was following, and they told him to stay facing forward. Every time Marcus looked back, the man was slightly closer than before, even though Marcus didn't hear him accelerate. Marcus whispered to Laura that when they reached the main road, they had to run to the car. The tow truck eventually arrived and the police stayed around them the entire time until their truck was loaded up. They had to sit in the back of a patrol car to stay warm while they finished everything. No one really said much. Laura held Daniel in her lap and Marcus just stared out the window, watching the dark tree lines, half expecting to see someone standing there again. On the ride back home, none of them talked. It was like all of them were afraid that saying anything out loud would make it real again. They didn't try to cut down a Christmas tree ever again. They didn't even go back to that mountain area. Even now, 10 years later, Marcus refuses to go anywhere near it. To this day, what scares Marcus the most is the thought that they had been watching long before the family even noticed them. They saw them arrive in that parking lot because they knew to strand them by slashing the tires, and they were waiting for them to go deep enough into the trees so they wouldn't make it back to the truck. They were fortunate they trusted their instincts enough and decided to leave for the truck almost right away. They were also fortunate Marcus was holding an axe, which may have dissuaded them from doing something catastrophic. Marcus doesn't like thinking about how close they came to potentially never going home. The narrator, whom we'll call Benjamin, still thinks about this one night from when he was 9 years old. It occurred a few days before Christmas. His parents both had obligations that evening, and since Benjamin was almost 9, they felt comfortable leaving him home for a brief period. His mother had to run to the grocery store to obtain supplies for Christmas dinner, and his father was working late as he typically did in December. Benjamin was sitting on the couch watching a Christmas movie and eating cookies by the fireplace and tree. Outside, darkness had already fallen, even though it was still relatively early. Benjamin remembers the Christmas lights flashing on the houses across the street. Everything was normal until the doorbell rang. The only reason this made Benjamin stop and look was because it was rather late and unexpected for someone to ring the bell. His mother always told him never to answer the door when he was alone. His parents never ring the bell obviously since they have keys. Benjamin got up and walked to the door anyway because he wanted to look through the peephole, and what he saw made his stomach drop. When Benjamin put his eye up to it, he saw there was a man standing on the porch wearing a Santa Claus costume. It was the complete outfit, the red coat, the hat, the beard, everything. But he didn't look like a normal friendly Santa character. He wasn't holding anything besides what looked like a clipboard, and he was standing far too close to the door like he was waiting for Benjamin to unlock it. Benjamin didn't know what to say at first, so he just kind of whispered, "Who is it?" The man moved his head slightly closer to the door, like he was trying to see through the peephole or hear Benjamin better. And in that moment he figured out right away that Benjamin was a kid. He did what was his best Santa impression as he said he was Santa and that he had gifts for Benjamin and that he should open the door. At 9 years old, Benjamin wasn't foolish and he didn't believe in Santa anymore. His parents taught him about strangers. Benjamin told him to go away and that he didn't need anything, and he tried to sound brave, but his voice cracked. The man went silent for a second, and then he asked a question that made Benjamin's blood run cold. "Are you home alone?" As soon as he said that, Benjamin knew to walk away. He instantly felt foolish for even letting the stranger know he was home. Benjamin didn't answer him. He stepped back from the door and walked fast to the living room because he suddenly felt too scared to stand near it. Benjamin sat on the couch and grabbed a pillow and stared at the TV like acting normal would make the fear go away. But then he heard the doorknob twist. The man was testing if the door was locked. Benjamin wanted to scream for help, but nobody was home. He waited and hoped the stranger would leave. But a moment later, Benjamin heard another sound from the back of the house. It was the back door handle, not twisting but being tested. It happened so rapidly after the front door that Benjamin bet the man ran around the house to the back. That door was even weaker than the front one and they almost never used it. Benjamin felt frozen in place and all he could think about was that his house only had 2 doors, and this man was trying both. He ran to the kitchen and grabbed the phone and dialed his mother's number. When she answered, Benjamin started talking really fast, trying not to cry. He told her someone was trying to get into the house and he was dressed like Santa. His mother got serious right away and told him she was coming home immediately, but would she make it in time? His mother told Benjamin to stay in the living room and keep the curtains closed. Benjamin sat on the floor behind the couch where he couldn't be seen from any windows, and he stayed completely still. He kept hearing small noises outside like footsteps or light taps, just various sounds indicating that someone was still there. Eventually they stopped and not long after Benjamin heard a car pulling into their driveway, and he knew it was his mother because he recognized her squeaking brakes. Benjamin stayed where he was until he heard the front door unlock and slam open. His mother came in breathing hard and holding 2 grocery bags. She locked the door behind her and yelled out for Benjamin and he ran to her right away. She embraced him and then told him she had just seen a man dressed as Santa walking down their street. She said she slowed her car down when she saw him and she yelled at him out the window asking what he was doing. The man told her he was going door to door asking for donations, but she didn't believe him for a second. She said he looked nervous and that he walked away fast when she started yelling. Benjamin's mother told him she was proud of him for not opening the door and for calling her right away. She called the police and reported the man, and Benjamin is sure police at the very least surveyed the area. They never found out if he was arrested or if he just disappeared into the neighborhood. 2 neighbors revealed something that made the incident even more disturbing. ***. 2 neighbors did say though that the man knocked on their doors asking for donations, though they said it seemed like a scam. Regardless, that doesn't change the fact that he tried to get into their house where he knew a little boy was home alone. Benjamin still thinks about that night every year around Christmas when he sees Santa decorations. He just remembers being 9 years old and knowing that man on their porch was not Santa and that he wanted something else. Benjamin guesses he was lucky the doors were locked and his mother got home when she did. What would have happened if that door was unlocked is terrifying to think about. These interconnected stories of holiday terror serve as stark reminders that the most dangerous threats often come dressed in the most innocent disguises, and that the season of joy can sometimes harbor the darkest intentions. If this story moved you, hit subscribe with notifications on. And tell me in the comments, what city are you watching from?